An alien SOS echoed across the stars. Humanity answered with Death Worlder brutality. The message arrived at Earth's Deep Space Communication Array at 1437 GMT on a Tuesday that would forever change the galaxy's understanding of humanity. Dr. Sarah Chen was reviewing routine stellar background radiation when her equipment suddenly screamed with an incoming transmission unlike anything in human history. The signal came from the Kepler 442 system nearly 1,200 light-years away. What made it remarkable wasn't the distance, but the fact that it was clearly artificial, desperately repeating the same pattern over and over again. The universal mathematical sequences embedded within left no doubt. This was an intelligent species crying for help. Within 6 hours, every major government on Earth had teams working to decode the message. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source. A 12-year-old prodigy named Marcus Webb, who noticed the signal's rhythm matched distress patterns found in endangered whale songs. His insight provided the key that unlocked the translation. The message was simple, terrifying, and heartbreaking. We are the last. Our children hide in the dark places. The devourers come. If anyone hears this, we were called the Velkari. We tried to be good. Please remember us. The transmission had been traveling for over 1,000 years. Whatever had happened to the Velkari was ancient history by human standards, but something about the message's raw desperation struck every person who heard it. These weren't conquerors or warriors, they were a peaceful people who had faced extinction and used their final moments to reach out to the cosmos, hoping someone, somewhere, would remember they had existed. Admiral Rebecca Torres stood before the United Earth Council 3 days later, her weathered face grim as she addressed the emergency session. Behind her, a holographic star map showed the Kepler 442 system, now designated as the Velkari Memorial Zone. "The message analysis is complete," she announced. "The Velkari were a peaceful, plant-based species that achieved spaceflight roughly 2,000 years ago. Their transmissions indicate they had a thriving civilization across 14 worlds in their system. Archaeological data suggests they were pacifists by nature. Their technology focused on healing, growing, and nurturing rather than warfare." Council Representative Kim Martinez leaned forward. "Admiral, with respect, why are we mobilizing our fleet for a civilization that's been dead for a millennium? Shouldn't our resources focus on current threats?" Admiral Torres touched her control panel, and the hologram shifted to show intercepted communications from the Outer Rim colonies. "Because, Representative Martinez, the devourers are still out there, and they're not done." The new data painted a horrifying picture. Across the galaxy, the same pattern repeated. Thriving civilizations would suddenly go silent, their final transmissions always mentioning the same enemy. The devourers moved like a plague across the stars, consuming everything in their path. 17 known species had vanished in the last 500 years alone, each leaving behind similar messages of terror and despair. "The Velkari weren't the first," Torres continued, "and they certainly weren't the last. Intelligence suggests the devourers are nomadic, moving from system to system, strip-mining entire worlds of all biological matter before moving on. They don't communicate, they don't negotiate, and they don't leave survivors." The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they knew they weren't, but they also knew that something was systematically exterminating every intelligent species it encountered. Dr. Elena Vasquez, head of the Xenobiology Department, stood to address the room. "Based on recovered data fragments from dead systems, we've pieced together the Devourers' methodology. They're not random destroyers, they're harvesters. They strip worlds of all organic matter, process it through massive biorefineries, and use the energy to fuel their expansion. It's industrialized extinction." "How many of them are there?" asked Representative Chen Wei. Unknown, but the consumption patterns suggest a fleet of thousands, possibly tens of thousands of ships. Each one appears to be a city-sized harvesting vessel capable of processing an entire planet's biosphere in months. The room erupted in worried murmurs. Representative Martinez stood again, his voice shaky. "Admiral, we've just achieved interstellar travel ourselves. Our most advanced warships are tiny compared to what you're describing. How can we possibly hope to fight something like this?" Admiral Torres smiled for the first time since entering the chamber, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Representative, you're thinking like a Velkari. You're thinking like every other peaceful species that's ever encountered the Devourers. They expected to find other civilizations like themselves, rational, diplomatic, willing to find common ground." She gestured toward Earth through the chamber's massive viewport. "But we're not like them. We didn't evolve in some peaceful garden world where the biggest predator was a flower that grew too fast. We crawled out of a death world where everything wanted to kill us, from the bacteria in our water to the storms in our skies. We've been practicing warfare since we learned to pick up sticks." The Admiral activated another hologram, this one showing Earth's military capabilities. Thousands of ships, from nimble fighters to massive dreadnoughts, filled the display. But more importantly, it showed the industrial capacity behind them. Factories on every continent, asteroid mining operations, orbital shipyards that never stopped building. "The Devourers have never encountered a species like us," Torres continued. "They've faced gardener races, thinker races, peaceful trader civilizations. They've never met a species that considers violence an art form that turned competition into evolution's greatest tool. They've never fought someone who invented weapons for fun and turned war into science." Dr. Chen had been quietly studying her tablet during the discussion. She looked up suddenly, her face pale. "Admiral, I'm reading the latest deep space scans. There are massive energy signatures moving through the Proxima Centauri system. The patterns match Devourer harvesting operations." The chamber fell dead silent. Proxima Centauri was humanity's nearest stellar neighbor, less than 5 light years away. If the Devourers were there, it meant they had likely detected Earth's radio transmissions. Humanity was next on the menu. Admiral Torres nodded grimly. "The decision is no longer whether to fight Council members. It's whether we fight them there or wait for them to come here. I recommend we choose the former." Representative Martinez was sweating now. "But Admiral, even if we mobilize everything we have, how can we hope to win against something that's been consuming galaxies for thousands of years?" Torres looked around the room, meeting each representative's eyes. "Because we have something they've never encountered before. We have rage. When the Velkari faced extinction, they sent a goodbye message. When humanity faces extinction, we don't say goodbye. We say, 'Come and take it.'" She activated the final display, real-time feeds from every military base on Earth and throughout the colonies. Soldiers, sailors, Marines, and Space Force personnel were already mobilizing, preparing for humanity's first interstellar war. The message was clear. Earth wasn't going to wait to be harvested. "The Velkari asked the universe to remember them," Admiral Torres said quietly. "I suggest we do better than that. I suggest we avenge them." The vote was unanimous. For the first time in human history, every nation on Earth united behind a single cause. Not exploration, not colonization, but war. The Devourers had spent millennia consuming peaceful civilizations who couldn't comprehend their brutality. They were about to discover what happened when they tried to harvest a species that had been practicing brutality since before they could walk upright. The message the Velkari had sent across the stars had indeed been answered. But instead of mourners, they had found something far more dangerous. They had found humanity. The hunt begins. 6 months after the Council's declaration of war, the first human fleet assembled in orbit around Mars. It was a sight that would have terrified any peaceful species in the galaxy. 200 ships of various sizes, each one designed with a single purpose in mind: destruction. Commander Jake Reaper Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, humanity's newest and most lethal dreadnought. Around him, his crew performed final system checks with the casual efficiency of predators preparing for a hunt. These weren't scientists or explorers. They were soldiers, Marines, and naval officers who had trained their entire lives for combat. "Sir, all ships report ready," announced Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim from her position at the tactical station. "Weapon systems are green across the board, and our new toys are loaded and ready." Morrison nodded, studying the tactical display that showed their destination. The Proxima Centauri system was now confirmed to be under Devourer occupation. 3 massive harvesting ships, each the size of Manhattan, were systematically stripping the planets of all organic matter. They had been working for 8 months, moving with the methodical precision of a factory production line. "What's our intelligence on their capabilities, Kim?" Morrison asked. "Each harvester appears to be protected by approximately 50 escort vessels," she replied, pulling up detailed scans. "The escorts are roughly frigate-sized, but with energy signatures we've never seen before. The harvesters themselves appear to be heavily armored, but focused on processing rather than combat. Think of them as floating slaughterhouses rather than warships." Dr. Marcus Webb, now 24, and serving as the fleet's xenobiology specialist, looked up from his sensor readings. "Commander, there's something else. The energy patterns suggest the Devourers are not just harvesting organic matter. They're consuming entire planetary ecosystems, down to the bacterial level. They're not just strip mining. They're committing complete biological sterilization." Morrison's jaw tightened. The more they learned about the Devourers, the more obvious it became that this wasn't just conquest or even resource extraction. This was systematic extinction on an industrial scale. "Any sign they've detected our approach?" Morrison asked. "Negative, sir," reported Ensign Rodriguez from the sensor station. "They appear to be completely focused on their harvesting operation. No indication they've even noticed us, and we're less than 2 days out from weapons range." Morrison found this both encouraging and disturbing. A species that had been destroying civilizations for thousands of years should have better situational awareness. Either they were incredibly arrogant, or they had simply never encountered meaningful resistance. "Sir," interrupted Lieutenant Kim, "we're receiving a transmission from the UES Fury. Captain Williams requests permission to speak with you privately." Morrison accepted the communication, and Captain Lisa Williams' face appeared on his private channel. Her expression was troubled. "Jake, my science team has been analyzing the Devourer ships more closely. We've identified something that changes everything." "Go ahead, Lisa." "The escort ships aren't ships at all. They're living creatures, massive, spacefaring organisms that the Devourers have somehow enslaved or bred specifically for warfare. The harvesters themselves appear to be cybernetic constructs, part machine and part living tissue." Morrison felt his blood run cold. "Are you saying the Devourers are using biological weapons?" "Worse than that. The Devourers themselves appear to be a hybrid species, part organic, part machine. They've essentially turned themselves into living weapons designed for one purpose: consumption. They don't just use biological warfare, Jake. They are biological warfare." The implications hit Morrison like a physical blow. Humanity had prepared for war against an advanced alien species. They had not prepared for war against something that had literally evolved itself into the perfect harvesting organism. "Captain Williams, maintain radio silence until further notice. I need to brief the fleet commanders." Morrison cut the transmission and immediately called for an emergency meeting of all ship captains. Within an hour, the holographic forms of 200 commanders filled the Vengeance's briefing room. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a problem," Morrison began, activating the tactical display. "Our enemy is not what we thought. The Devourers aren't just using biological weapons, they have become biological weapons." He outlined Williams's discoveries, watching as the faces of his commanders grew increasingly grim. These were hardened military officers who had seen combat across human space, but the idea of fighting an enemy that had literally evolved itself into a living harvesting machine was something beyond their experience. "Sir," interrupted Captain Chen of the UES Retribution, "are we still proceeding with the original attack plan?" Morrison studied the tactical display for a long moment. The original plan had been straightforward: disable the escort ships, then destroy the harvesters before they could escape. But fighting living creatures that had been bred for space warfare changed everything. "We adapt," Morrison said finally. "The Devourers may have evolved themselves into perfect harvesting machines, but they've made one crucial mistake. They've never fought a species that evolves its weapons just as quickly as its biology." He activated a new display showing humanity's latest military innovations. 6 months ago, we didn't know the Devourers existed. Today, we're deploying weapons specifically designed to fight them. Our biologists have developed viral agents that target synthetic organic hybrid systems. Our engineers have created electromagnetic pulse weapons that can disrupt both mechanical and biological neural networks. Our physicists have weaponized nanites that can break down organic matter at the molecular level. Captain Torres of the UES Warhammer raised her hand. "Commander, those weapons are all theoretical. We've never tested them against actual Devourer technology." Morrison smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Captain, that's where you're wrong. We've been testing them for months, against ourselves." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity had spent 6 months trying to create weapons capable of killing the Devourers, and to test those weapons, they had used them against human volunteers wearing the closest approximations of Devourer biology they could create. "Every weapon we're bringing to this fight has been proven effective against hybrid organic synthetic systems," Morrison continued. "We've tested them on volunteers who underwent temporary cybernetic enhancement specifically to simulate Devourer physiology. We've literally been practicing killing ourselves to learn how to kill them." Captain Kim of the UES Devastator spoke up. "Sir, that's insane." "Yes, it is," Morrison agreed. "And that's why we're going to win. The Devourers have spent thousands of years perfecting themselves as harvesting machines. But they've never encountered a species insane enough to use their own bodies as test subjects for weapons designed to kill hybrid organisms." He activated the final display. Real-time biological readouts from the volunteer test subjects. Even now, human volunteers were undergoing procedures to temporarily merge their nervous systems with mechanical implants, allowing scientists to test new weapons against living hybrid targets. "The Devourers see organic life as a resource to be consumed," Morrison said. "We see everything, including ourselves, as potential weapons to be optimized. They've evolved themselves into perfect predators. We've evolved ourselves into something much more dangerous: perfect killers." The fleet commanders began to nod, understanding dawning in their eyes. This wasn't just a military operation anymore, it was an evolutionary arms race compressed into 6 months of frantic development. "Final weapons check in 12 hours, Morrison announced. "All ships will test their new biological warfare systems against the practice targets we've brought along. I want every single weapon proven effective before we engage." As the commanders filed out, Dr. Webb approached Morrison privately. "Commander, there's something else you should know. The practice targets, the volunteers who've been helping us test these weapons, they've reported something unusual." "Go on." "The weapons we've developed don't just kill hybrid organisms. They're specifically designed to cause maximum pain and terror before death. The volunteers reported experiencing psychological effects that suggest the weapons attack not just the body, but the mind. Morrison considered this information. Are you saying our weapons are designed to torture as well as kill? I'm saying our weapons are designed to make the target suffer in ways that pure organic or pure synthetic beings cannot. We've created weapons that specifically exploit the psychological vulnerabilities of hybrid consciousness. Morrison nodded slowly. Good. The Devourers have spent thousands of years terrorizing peaceful species before consuming them. It's time they experienced terror themselves. As the human fleet prepared for its first engagement with the Devourers, the universe was about to witness something unprecedented. A species that had turned cruelty into science, weapons development into art, and psychological warfare into evolution's greatest achievement. The Devourers had spent millennia as the galaxy's apex predators. They were about to discover what happened when apex predators encountered something that had evolved beyond predation into pure, weaponized hatred. Death World Retribution. The battle for Proxima Centauri began at 0600 hours with a silence that would have confused any other species in the galaxy. The human fleet approached the Devourer harvesting operation without fanfare, without challenges, without any of the ritualistic communications that typically preceded interstellar warfare. Commander Morrison watched from the bridge of the Vengeance as they closed to weapons range. The Devourer harvesters continued their methodical consumption of Proxima Centauri's worlds, their escort creatures drifting in lazy patrol patterns around the massive biomechanical ships. They still haven't detected us, reported Lieutenant Kim from her sensor station. Sir, this is unusual. Any spacefaring civilization should have long-range sensors. Dr. Webb looked up from his xenobiology console. Commander, I don't think they're not detecting us. I think they're not reacting to us. Look at the behavioral patterns. They're showing the same response they would to any organic life form. They're treating us like potential food sources, not threats. The realization hit Morrison like a cold wind. The Devourers had been consuming civilizations for so long that they had literally forgotten what military resistance looked like. Every species they had encountered had been peaceful, rational, focused on diplomacy and survival rather than warfare. They had no behavioral framework for understanding and approaching military threat. Begin Phase 1, Morrison ordered quietly. Across the human fleet, 200 ships simultaneously activated their new biological warfare systems. The weapons that had been tested on human volunteers for 6 months were now deployed against their intended targets. The effect was immediate and devastating. The escort creatures, living organisms bred or enslaved by the Devourers for space combat, suddenly began writhing in apparent agony. The hybrid biological synthetic nervous systems that made them ideal weapons also made them incredibly vulnerable to humanity's specially designed viral agents. Sir, the escort creatures they're screaming, reported Ensign Rodriguez from the communication station. The signal is coming through on multiple frequencies, including some that shouldn't be possible for organic vocal systems. Morrison watched the tactical display as 50 escort creatures around each harvester began to convulse, their massive forms twisting in space as the human weapons attacked their hybrid nervous systems. The screams weren't just audible, they were generating electromagnetic pulses that were interfering with Devourer communications. The harvesters are responding, announced Lieutenant Kim. Commander, they're trying to communicate with us. Put it through, Morrison ordered. The voice that emerged from the speakers was unlike anything in human experience, a harmony of organic and synthetic elements that suggested a mind that was both living and artificial, individual and collective. Unknown entities. Cease your attack on our biological assets. We do not recognize your species signature. Identify your origins and your intentions. Morrison looked around his bridge crew, seeing the same cold determination in their eyes that he felt in his own chest. "Open a channel." "Channel open." "Sir." "This is Commander Jake Morrison of the United Earth Space Force. We are human beings, from the planet Earth in the Sol system. We received a distress call from a species called the Velkari. You killed them. We are here to return the favor." There was a long pause before the Devourer responded. When it spoke again, there was something different in its tone. Confusion, perhaps even concern. "The Velkari were consumed 1,047 of your years ago. Their biological matter was processed efficiently. Their termination was completed. Why do you refer to them in present context?" Morrison's jaw tightened. "Because we don't forget, and we don't forgive. Every species you've murdered is still alive in our memory, and we're here to make sure you remember them too. This is not logical. The Velkari were processed. They cannot generate military response. You cannot be acting in their defense. Explain your motivations." Dr. Webb gestured to Morrison, indicating he wanted to speak. Morrison nodded. "This is Dr. Marcus Webb, xenobiologist. Let me explain it in terms your hybrid consciousness might understand. You have been consuming civilizations for thousands of years, correct?" "Confirmed. Resource extraction and processing is our primary function." "And in all that time, have you ever encountered a species that fought back effectively?" Another pause. "Negative. Organic civilizations lack the psychological framework for effective military resistance. They attempt diplomacy, evacuation, or defensive fortification. All responses are ultimately ineffective against superior harvesting technology." "That's because you've never encountered a Death World species," Webb continued, his voice growing colder. "You've been feeding on gardener races, species that evolved in peaceful environments where cooperation was the primary survival strategy. We evolved on a planet that tried to kill us every single day for millions of years." Morrison watched the tactical display as the escort creatures continued to die in agony. The human weapons weren't just killing them. They were designed to cause maximum suffering, to turn the creatures' hybrid nature against them in the most painful way possible. "You don't understand what you've walked into," Morrison added, taking back the communication. "You've spent thousands of years consuming species that see warfare as an aberration, something to be avoided. We see warfare as evolution's greatest achievement. You've been eating sheep. Now you're facing wolves." The Devourer response carried a new tone, something that might have been concern or even fear. "Your weapons are causing excessive neural trauma to our biological assets. This level of suffering serves no tactical purpose. It is inefficient." Morrison smiled. "The suffering is the tactical purpose. We want your escort creatures to die in agony because we want you to feel what every civilization you've murdered felt as they watched their families get processed. We want you to experience terror." "Begin Phase 2, Morrison ordered his fleet. The human ships began their advance on the harvesters themselves. But this wasn't a simple military attack. Every ship was broadcasting specific electromagnetic frequencies designed to interfere with the hybrid consciousness networks that connected the Devourers to their technology. The effect was immediate. The massive harvester ships began to list and drift as their biosynthetic control systems were disrupted by frequencies that attacked both their organic and artificial components simultaneously. "Status report," Morrison called out. "The harvesters are experiencing what appears to be the equivalent of a nervous breakdown," reported Dr. Webb. "Our electromagnetic warfare is disrupting the connection between their organic consciousness and their mechanical systems. They're essentially being forced to experience existence as purely organic beings while controlling purely mechanical bodies." "Sir," interrupted Lieutenant Kim, "we're receiving massive communication bursts from the harvesters. They're pleading." Morrison's expression didn't change. "Let them plead. The Velkari pleaded too." The human fleet continued its advance, but they weren't trying to destroy the harvesters quickly. Instead, they were systematically dismantling them piece by piece, using precisely targeted weapons that would cause maximum psychological trauma to the hybrid consciousness controlling each ship. "Commander," came the Devourer transmission again, "we do not understand your methods. Your weapons appear designed to maximize suffering rather than achieve tactical objectives." "This is not efficient warfare." Morrison activated his personal communication channel. "You're right, it's not efficient, it's not tactical, it's revenge. We're not trying to defeat you efficiently. We're trying to make you suffer the way you made the Velkhari suffer, and every other species you've murdered." "This serves no evolutionary purpose," the Devourer responded, confusion evident in its hybrid voice. "Yes, it does," Morrison replied. "It serves our evolutionary purpose. We evolved on a world where the strong didn't just defeat the weak, they made examples of them. We developed psychological warfare because on our world, reputation was a survival tool. We learned to make our enemies suffer not just to win battles, but to prevent future battles by becoming too terrifying to challenge." The human weapons continued their work. The massive harvesters were being systematically crippled, their biomechanical systems failing as human weapons exploited every vulnerability in their hybrid nature. But more than that, the psychological warfare was working. The Devourer consciousness was experiencing something it had never encountered in thousands of years of conquest: genuine terror. "Your species is malfunctioning," came the increasingly desperate Devourer transmission. "This level of aggression serves no resource acquisition purpose. It is wasteful. It is cruel." Dr. Webb looked up from his console. "Commander, they're starting to understand. Look at their neural activity patterns. They're experiencing what appears to be the hybrid equivalent of panic." Morrison nodded. "Good. Now they know how the Velkhari felt." "Begin Phase 3, he ordered. Phase 3 wasn't about destruction, it was about demonstration. The human fleet began broadcasting the Velkhari's final message across all frequencies, forcing the Devourer consciousness to experience the dying words of their victims while simultaneously experiencing the terror of impending defeat themselves. "We are the last. Our children hide in the dark places. The Devourers come. If anyone hears this, we were called the Velkhari. We tried to be good. Please, remember us." The message repeated over and over as human weapons continued their systematic dismantling of the Devourer ships. But Morrison noticed something on his tactical display: energy signatures moving at the edge of sensor range. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Kim, "massive energy signatures approaching from the outer system. Analysis suggests hundreds of ships. It appears to be a Devourer fleet." Morrison studied the readings. The approaching fleet was enormous, far larger than anything humanity could field. But instead of concern, he felt something else entirely: satisfaction. "Open a channel to the lead harvester," Morrison ordered. "Channel open, sir." "This is Commander Morrison. I want you to listen very carefully. Your fleet is approaching, and you probably think you're about to rescue these harvesters and destroy us?" Morrison gestured to his tactical officer, who activated a new display showing the human fleet's true capabilities. "What you don't understand is that this isn't our main fleet. This is a scouting force. We brought exactly enough ships to defeat your local operation and make you call for help. We wanted you to call for reinforcements." The tactical display shifted, showing energy signatures throughout the Proxima Centauri system, human ships that had been waiting in stealth, positioned throughout the system for weeks. "You're about to experience something that no species in galactic history has ever experienced," Morrison continued. "You're about to be trapped by a Death World species that thinks of warfare as an art form and psychological torture as a science." The Devourer response was barely coherent. This is not how warfare functions." Morrison's smile was predatory. "You're right. This isn't how warfare functions for civilized species. But we're not civilized. We're apex predators from a death world, and we've spent 6 months planning exactly how to make you suffer before we kill you. As the massive Devourer fleet approached what they thought was a rescue operation, they were flying directly into the largest military trap in galactic history. The human race had answered the Velkhari's distress call, not with peaceful memorial services, but with weaponized hatred refined into perfect tactical execution. The galaxy's most efficient predators were about to discover what happened when they tried to harvest a species that had turned predation into an art form, cruelty into a science, and revenge into an evolutionary advantage. The Velkhari's message had indeed been answered, and the universe would never be the same.